It was just another quiet night at the gas station. I wasn't expecting anything unusual. I mean, that's the thing about working the night shift at a rural gas station. Nothing really happens. It's always the same. The hum of the lights, the occasional car pulling up, the same old ads looping on the TV behind the counter. But that night was different. I didn't know it then, but I was about to step into a nightmare. I was leaning against the counter, scrolling mindlessly through my phone when the door jingled open. I didn't think much of it at first. Just another car pulling in for gas, or maybe someone needing to use the bathroom. But then, before I could even look up, the door slammed shut behind them, and the air seemed to shift. It got heavier, colder. I heard the unmistakable click of a gun being cocked. My heart skipped. I froze. "Don't move." There were 4 of them, all wearing masks, but it wasn't their faces that made my blood run cold. It was their voices. Their voices didn't belong in this gas station at this hour. One of them, the one who seemed to be in charge, spoke with a voice I knew all too well. A voice I thought I'd never hear again. It was him. "Jake," he said, and for a second I felt like I was going to pass out. "You always were a dumb one." I hadn't heard that voice in years. I turned slowly, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. My stomach twisted. That voice belonged to Chris. Chris Hawk, my childhood friend. The guy I'd spent hours playing video games with, riding bikes, just being stupid kids. But things had changed between us. He'd disappeared, gone down a different path, a darker one. We hadn't spoken in over 5 years. The last time I'd seen him, he was getting into a car with some shady characters, and I had a feeling he wasn't coming back from that. But I didn't expect him to be here. Not like this. "What the hell, Chris?" My voice was shaky, but I couldn't stop myself. I had to say something. "Shut up, Jake," he snapped. "I'm not here for a reunion. Just do as you're told, and maybe you'll make it through the night." The tension in the air thickened, and I noticed the other 3, each holding a gun, eyes cold, like they were just waiting for an excuse to pull the trigger. My hands started sweating. I could barely breathe. What was going on? Why this? The bell over the door jingled again, and I looked up, hoping for some kind of miracle. A customer, an older man, had wandered in, not even noticing the scene unfolding in front of him. He walked straight up to the counter, muttering about needing a pack of cigarettes. He didn't see the guns, didn't hear the tension. "Get down," I yelled, but it was too late. Chris's henchman, the one closest to the door, didn't hesitate. He shot the man in the chest, right in front of me. The body dropped with a sickening thud. I could feel my stomach churn, the sound of the gunshot still ringing in my ears. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything, but I was paralyzed. I looked at Chris, hoping for some sign of humanity, but his face was covered in a mask, his eyes cold. "Now, you listen to me, Jake," Chris said, stepping forward. "You do exactly what we say or I'll start with your family. You got that?" He pulled out my phone, the one I had left on the counter, and dialed a number. My stomach sank as he spoke. "Tell your family we're coming for them. If Jake doesn't cooperate, they're the first to go." My blood ran cold. Number not my family. They were miles away, probably asleep in their cozy little house. But I knew Chris well enough to understand he wasn't bluffing. Not anymore. "Chris, please." I tried, my voice barely above a whisper. "Don't do this. You..." He cut me off, his eyes narrowing. "Shut the hell up, Jake. You didn't listen to me when I needed you. Now it's my turn. You're gonna open the safe, or I'll make you regret it." Safe? There was no damn safe. I just worked here. But that didn't seem to matter. They were expecting something, and I had nothing to give them. Nothing that could save me. Then, as if things weren't bad enough, I heard something behind me. A faint rustle. I glanced over my shoulder, my heart racing. There was someone in the storage room, the small back room where we kept extra supplies. I wasn't sure who it was, but I heard the click of a silent alarm. The cops were on their way. But it was too late. It was always too late. I looked at the gun behind the counter. It was a last resort kind of thing, hidden behind the register for emergency situations. My hands were trembling so hard, I wasn't sure I could even grip it. And if I did, would I be able to pull the trigger? Chris, sensing my hesitation, smirked. "You think you can fight back, Jake? You're not even close." They started torturing me, not physically, but mentally, demanding access to a safe that didn't exist. The pain in my chest from the loss of control was worse than anything they could do with their fists or their guns. Just when I thought I couldn't take any more, my coworker Sam showed up. I didn't even hear him walk in. Maybe he'd been delayed, maybe he just didn't know what was going on. But it didn't matter. Chris saw him, and before Sam could say a word, he shot him right in the head. I could feel the world crumbling around me. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Sam was just a kid, barely 19, just trying to get by. I couldn't save him. But I couldn't die here. Not like this. The sirens wailed in the distance. The cops were getting close, but I wasn't sure how much longer I had. Then, I overheard Chris and his guys talking. They weren't going to let me go. They were going to burn the gas station down with me inside. The fire would take care of everything, they said. No evidence, no loose ends. That's when I realized something. Chris wasn't here for money. He was here because of me. He'd been watching me, planning this for a long time. This wasn't just a robbery. It was personal. But there was something else I hadn't realized until now. My family. They weren't safe. Chris had them. They were here too, somewhere close. I didn't know where, but the thought of them being trapped in this nightmare was enough to light a fire inside me. I waited for the right moment. When one of the guys turned his back, I grabbed the gun. This time, I didn't hesitate. I aimed and fired, taking down the closest guy before the others even knew what hit them. But Chris? He was the last one standing. In that final moment, it was just me and him, the childhood friend who had turned into a monster. And as the sirens grew louder, I knew I had one shot, one chance. I had to do it. For my family, for myself. I fired, and I survived. It's funny how I used to think the worst part about working night shifts was boredom. Long hours, silence so thick it feels like it's swallowing you whole, and just the low hum of security monitors to keep you company. That's what I signed up for when I took the job at Warehouse 13, a sprawling complex on the outskirts of Detroit. I figured it'd be easy money. Walk a few rounds, keep an eye on the cameras, and maybe scare off a stray raccoon now and then. That night started like any other. I had my thermos of cheap coffee, a half-eaten sandwich, and my phone propped up on the desk, scrolling through old videos to kill the time. Outside, the rain was coming down hard, drumming on the metal roof. It was peaceful in its own way, the kind of night that made you feel like nothing could touch you in here. Then the truck showed up. I remember glancing at the monitors and freezing. The headlights cut through the downpour, blinding against the grainy feed. It wasn't unusual to get deliveries during the day, but after midnight? That was a first. The truck pulled up to the loading dock, and I waited, expecting the usual. A driver to hop out and explain some mix-up. Instead, the truck just sat there, engine rumbling, lights on. I radioed my supervisor. Protocol, you know. But no one answered. Great. I was on my own. Grabbing my flashlight, I pulled on my jacket and headed out into the rain. The air was sharp and cold, the kind that cuts through even the thickest layers. I banged on the side of the truck, trying to ignore the uneasy knot forming in my stomach. "Hey!" I shouted. "You're not supposed to be here. What's going on?" The door to the cab creaked open, and a man stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing a rain-soaked hoodie that made it impossible to see his face. "Got a delivery," he said, his voice gruff. "Not at this hour, you don't," I said, crossing my arms. "Let me see some paperwork." He didn't respond. Instead, he walked past me and headed to the back of the truck, motioning for me to follow. Against my better judgment, I did. He yanked the roll-up door open, and I felt the blood drain from my face. Crates, dozens of them, stacked neatly in rows. They were marked with symbols I didn't recognize, but it didn't take a genius to figure out this wasn't standard inventory. The man climbed into the truck, gesturing for me to help unload. "I don't think so," I said, stepping back. This isn't right." That's when I felt it, the cold press of metal against the back of my head. A gun. "Do what you're told," a voice hissed from behind me. My heart was hammering as they marched me inside. There were more of them now, at least 4, maybe 5, emerging from the shadows like they'd been waiting for this moment. They had the kind of presence that made the air feel heavier, suffocating. "Start unloading," one of them barked, shoving me toward the truck. I obeyed, my hands trembling as I grabbed the first crate. It was heavier than I expected, and when I stumbled, the lid shifted just enough for me to glimpse what was inside. Guns. Not just any guns, military grade, sleek and deadly, the kind you'd see in action movies. My stomach churned. I didn't ask questions. I didn't dare. I just kept unloading, crate after crate, trying to make sense of what was happening. Who were these guys? And why the hell did they pick Warehouse 13? About halfway through, I heard a voice that made my blood run cold. "Hey, wait a second." It was the driver, the one who'd been quiet up until now. "Don't I know you?" I turned slowly, and that's when I saw his face for the first time. It was rough, scarred, and vaguely familiar. My mind raced, trying to place him, and then it hit me. The bar. A few months back, I'd gotten into an argument with a guy over some spilled drink. It hadn't escalated, but the tension had been enough to stick in my memory. Now here he was, staring me down with recognition in his eyes. "You've seen too much," he said, his voice low. "We can't let you walk away from this." Panic surged through me, but I tried to keep my composure. "Look, I don't care what you're doing here," I said. "I just want to clock out and go home." They didn't believe me. Of course they didn't. One of them grabbed my phone off the desk and smashed it against the floor. Another guy, taller, meaner, stepped forward and hit me hard in the gut. I doubled over, gasping for air as they laughed. "This isn't personal," the leader said, crouching down so we were face to face. "But you're part of this now. And if you even think about running—" He didn't need to finish the sentence. The threat hung heavy in the air. I don't know how long it went on. Hours, maybe. The rain never let up, pounding against the walls as if mocking me. At one point, I thought I'd caught a break. One of the guys, younger, less hardened, slipped me a small key. He didn't say anything, just gave me a look that said, "Use it wisely." But before I could make my move, the leader's radio crackled to life. "Boss, we've got company." More trucks pulled up. This time, it wasn't reinforcements. It was another gang, and they weren't here to share. The air shifted, tense and electric. Guns were drawn, voices raised, and then all hell broke loose. The first shot was deafening. I hit the ground, scrambling for cover as bullets tore through the air. The crates exploded, sending splinters and weapons flying. It was chaos, pure and unrelenting. I don't know how I made it out. Maybe it was luck, or maybe I'd just reached the point where survival instinct kicked in. I grabbed a crowbar, swung it at the nearest thug, and ran. The warehouse was on fire now, the flames casting eerie shadows as I weaved through the chaos. In the end, it was the undercover cop who saved me. He'd been deep in the cartel for months, waiting for a chance to bring them down. Together, we managed to take out the last of the gang, but not without cost. By the time the police arrived, I was barely standing. They pulled me out, covered in soot and blood, and whisked me away into the night. I didn't go back to Warehouse 13. I couldn't. Instead, I started over. A new name, a new life. But sometimes, late at night, I hear the sound of rain on metal and feel the weight of that night pressing down on me. I survived. But part of me never left that warehouse. I didn't start the night thinking I'd be fighting for my life. Honestly, my biggest worry was whether I'd have enough energy to fold the mountain of laundry waiting for me at home after my shift. Graveyard shifts at the diner weren't glamorous, but they paid the bills. The regulars were predictable: grumpy truckers nursing bad coffee, drunks looking for greasy food to sober up, and the occasional insomniac just wanting somewhere to sit. That night started off normal enough. I had my apron tied tight, the smell of frying bacon and burnt toast lingering in the air as I filled coffee cups and took orders. The jukebox in the corner was playing some old rock ballad, barely audible over the hum of conversation and the clatter of dishes. It was around 2:30 a.m. when the door jingled open and they walked in. 4 men, dressed in black, their faces hard and unreadable. At first, I thought they were just a group of travelers, maybe bikers passing through. But something about them felt off. They moved with a purpose, their eyes scanning the room like they were looking for someone or something. "Sit anywhere," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. They ignored me, heading straight for the corner booth near the back. The air shifted, a quiet tension settling over the diner. Even the regulars seemed to sense it, their conversations trailing off into uneasy silence. I didn't have time to dwell on it. A trucker at the counter was waving me over, asking for a refill. I grabbed the coffee pot and tried to focus on the task at hand. But as I poured, I couldn't help stealing glances at the group. They were talking in low voices, their heads close together. One of them, a wiry guy with a scar running down his cheek, kept looking over at me. I knew better than to stare. This was Arizona, after all. You didn't ask too many questions about strangers, especially not in the middle of the night. The first sign of trouble came about 10 minutes later. A big rig pulled into the parking lot, its headlights cutting through the darkness. The driver, a burly man I'd seen a few times before, came in, shaking rain off his hat. "Storm's picking up," he grumbled, sliding onto a stool. I grabbed a menu, but before I could hand it to him, one of the men from the booth stood up. "Keys," he said, his voice cold and flat. The trucker frowned. "Excuse me?" "Your keys," the man repeated, pulling a gun from under his jacket. The diner fell deathly silent. The trucker didn't flinch, his face hardening. "You've got the wrong guy," he said, his voice steady. "Now put that thing away before someone gets hurt." It happened so fast, I almost didn't register it. The man raised the gun and fired. The sound was deafening, the crack echoing off the walls. The trucker slumped forward, blood pooling beneath him. I froze, the coffee pot slipping from my hand and shattering on the floor. The diner erupted into chaos. Screams, people scrambling to get out, chairs toppling over. But the men were quick, blocking the exits and barking orders to sit down. My heart was pounding, my breath shallow and uneven. One of the men grabbed my arm, yanking me toward their booth. "You're in charge here, right?" he asked, his grip bruising. I just work here," I stammered. "Please, I don't know what you want." "We're looking for something," he said, his eyes narrowing. "A briefcase. We know it's here." "I don't know anything about a briefcase," I said, tears welling in my eyes. "This is just a diner." The man didn't believe me. He dragged me into the kitchen where my coworker, a sweet older lady named Donna, was washing dishes. They started interrogating her too, demanding answers neither of us had. When she didn't give them what they wanted, they hit her. Hard. I wanted to scream, to fight back, but I was paralyzed with fear. These men weren't bluffing. They'd already killed once tonight. What was stopping them from doing it again? Then I saw him. One of the men standing near the counter was a regular. He came in every Wednesday night, always ordered the same thing: black coffee and a slice of pie. Our eyes met, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of recognition. But he quickly looked away, his expression unreadable. That's when I realized something was hidden in the diner. Something these men were willing to kill for. Back in the kitchen, I noticed a loose panel beneath the sink. While the men were distracted, I reached down and pried it open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a briefcase, its surface scratched and worn. My hands trembled as I opened it, revealing a stack of papers and photographs. The images were grainy but unmistakable. Crime scenes, bodies, evidence that could put these men away for life. One of them caught me red-handed. "She's got it!" he shouted, lunging toward me. In the chaos, one of their own turned on them, a younger guy who seemed sick of the violence. He pulled his gun, aiming it at their leader. "Enough," he said. "This isn't what I signed up for." The standoff was short-lived. The others overpowered him, but it created just enough of a distraction for me to slip out the back door. I ran, the rain soaking through my uniform, my feet slipping on the wet pavement. But I didn't get far. They caught up with me in the alley, dragging me back inside. That's when I remembered the gun. A customer had left it in the restroom a few nights ago, and I'd stashed it in the supply closet, planning to turn it in later. I made a break for it, my fingers fumbling as I retrieved the weapon. It felt heavy in my hands, foreign and terrifying. But when the leader cornered me, his gun raised, I didn't hesitate. I pulled the trigger. The shot rang out, and he crumpled to the floor. The others froze, their confidence shattered. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. The police arrived, guns drawn, but it was too late to save the trucker, Donna, or the others who'd been caught in the crossfire. I handed over the briefcase, my hands still trembling, and gave my statement as best I could. I don't work at the diner anymore. I can't. Every time I hear the jingle of a bell or the crack of thunder, I'm back there, reliving every second. But at least the men who tore through that quiet night are behind bars. Sometimes, survival feels like a hollow victory, but it's a victory nonetheless.